If you're going to play through the entire PlayStation library, you are going to spend a lot of time with licensed games. Movie tie-ins, sports games, cartoon tie-ins, they make up a surprisingly large chunk of that catalog, and there is no getting around them. So it's only fitting that before we've even gotten to the letter A, the very first entry in this marathon is a James Bond game. Welcome to the PlayStation Marathon, a series where I attempt to beat every single game released on the PS1. .007 The World Is Not Enough is a first-person shooter developed by Black Ops Entertainment and published by EA Games, released in 2000 as a tie-in to the 1999 Pierce Brosnan film of the same name. EA had picked up the James Bond gaming license a year earlier with Tomorrow Never Dies, and this was their second attempt at bringing 007 to the PlayStation. Now, if you know your Bond game history, you might be thinking, wait, didn't GoldenEye 007 on the N64 already define what a Bond FPS could be? And yeah, it absolutely did. But here's the thing, The World Is Not Enough also came out on the N64, developed by a completely different studio called Eurocom, and that version is generally regarded as the superior release. What we have here is the PlayStation version, a separate game entirely, built by Black Ops Entertainment on their own engine. Same movie, different game, different ambitions, and, as you're about to see, different results. Before we jump in, here's something buried in the credits that I have to mention. The motion capture stunt coordinator on this game is listed as Chad Stahelski. If that name rings a bell, it should. He'd go on to become the director of the John Wick films, among other titles. So there's a strange little piece of action movie history sitting quietly in the production notes of a PS1 Bond tie-in from the year 2000. Also worth noting, according to the manual, the voice cast may not include actors from the film. That caveat matters, but one name from the film who did show up in the credits is John Cleese, who reprised his role as R, the eccentric Q branch stand-in. Bond himself though, almost certainly not Brosnan. With all that context established, let's boot up the game. The game opens with a cinematic pulling scenes directly from the film, intercutting with gameplay footage. And that pattern, movie footage stitched into the game, continues throughout. Most of the cutscenes are literally ripped from the film. It's a choice that saves some budget and adds a sort of cinematic gloss, though it does create a visual whiplash when you go from watching a reasonably polished film cut to looking at a PS1 character model standing in a corridor. The title screen is clean enough. You've got New Game, Continue, Options, and a Movies section where you can replay unlocked cutscenes, including, for some reason, the MGM Lion intro. Whether that was someone's idea of a fun Easter egg or just an oversight, I have no idea. The visuals in-game are exactly what you'd expect from the era. No complaints on that front. This is a late PS1 title and it looks like one. The music is fitting, you get the James Bond theme and variations on it. It's atmospheric the first time, but it's so overused that by the 5th mission or so, it really starts to wear on you. The voice acting is actually performed well. The actors sound like they are trying, not like they are phoning it in. The problem though is that the audio quality is quite rough in some sections. Rough enough that I found myself checking the options menu to see if there were subtitles, of which there were none. I missed chunks of dialogue throughout, and I'd be lying if I said that didn't affect how I followed the story in the early going since I didn't watch the movie. Controls take some adjustments. This is a PS1 FPS without a second analog stick for camera control. You are moving and turning with the D-pad or left analog stick and managing everything else with the face buttons and triggers. There is auto aim, which is a godsend, and once I got my head around the layout, it became workable. I suspect this control scheme is going to be a recurring note for FPS games in this marathon, but that's for future me to worry about. Let's get into the actual gameplay. The story follows the film fairly closely, or at least it tries to, through a combination of in-engine cutscenes and those lifted film clips. Level 1 drops into a bank in Bilbao, where Bond is on a mission to interrogate a Swiss banker named Lachaise and recover money belonging to Sir Robert King, a British oil tycoon with connections to M. It looked like a stealth mission, and it technically is, but I discovered fairly quickly that you can push through it loud and fast without much consequence. Anyway, the mission goes sideways as usual. Lachaise is killed before he can give Bond the information he needs, and Bond has no choice but to escape with the money.
It's a terrible tragedy, but... The name Lachaise... Alright. But you'll have to protect me from...
Level 2 sends you chasing Lachaise's assassin through London. Turns out, the money Bond recovered was laced with explosives, the detonation of which kills King at MI6 headquarters. The assassin makes a run for it via boat down the Thames on her way to board a hot air balloon, and we have to apprehend her quickly and without any civilian casualties. The problem is that getting a clean shot on enemies in awkward positions means standing still and manually aiming, which might cost you a few fails before you realize there's a much simpler solution. Just walk past them. She eventually reaches the balloon and Bond catches up to her. He offers protection, but she refuses and destroys the balloon, ending her life rather than risk Bond not being able to keep her safe. After that rather grim mission, Bond is assigned to protect Elektra King, the oil heiress and daughter of the man who was just killed, while she oversees pipeline construction in Azerbaijan. This level puts you on a ski slope, defending her from a Powerhawk assault, snowmobile helicopter hybrids that swoop in and are frankly a pain to hit because of how erratically they move. The ski mechanics are functional and the enemies are manageable, but the Powerhawks can really test your patience. Then the game suddenly takes a detour with level 4, Russian Roulette. I want to spend a moment here because this mission is the game doing something unexpected. Bond visits Valentin Zukovsky, a former Russian mafia boss turned casino owner, to get information. Zukovsky will talk, but only if Bond can turn a $25,000 credit voucher into $100,000 at his blackjack table. There are no enemies in this level, just blackjack.
You're a gambling man, yes? I will give you this voucher. You can play in my casino for as long as you like. If you come back with more than 100,000, I'll give you the information you want. Deal?
In my first attempt, I put all my money on the first hand and I lost. My second attempt was the same exact play, and this time I won. I cannot explain my logic there. I had no logic. The game just let me win. I took the money and we moved on. If you are curious, the game tracks your accuracy stats in this mission as your win ratio at the table, which is either elegant design or someone's idea of a joke. Armed with information, we jump into level 5, Night's Watch, which is where the game decides to actually be a stealth game. You infiltrate Elektra's villa to photograph evidence aboard her telephones. No gun use is allowed until the very end. You have a tranquilizer that's gun with limited ammo and a cell phone stunner that recharges, and you have to walk your way through the property, completing objectives in any order you like. And side note, there is a piano in Elektra's bedroom that you can play. I have no idea why it's there. It serves no purpose other than playing the 007 theme when you interact with it, but I appreciate that someone on the development team put it in there anyway. The mission ends with a confrontation with Davidov, Elektra's head of security, and, as it turns out, Renard's inside man. You track him down, eliminate him, take his ID card, and board a plane to Kazakhstan. Masquerade sends Bond undercover into a Soviet-era nuclear facility, posing as a Russian scientist. The mission explicitly forbids drawing your weapon in front of the soldiers. Doing so turns every one of them hostile, and fighting back means mission failure. This is also the first of 2 levels where the night vision goggles become essential, which is a nice little gadget bit in an otherwise tightly constrained mission. This is where Bond meets Dr. Jones, an American nuclear physicist overseeing the decommissioning of the site. She promptly blows Bond's cover before he can kill Renard, and they both have to escape as Renard steals a plutonium core and detonates the silo behind them. Level 7 Flashpoint is a tense one. Bond and Jones have to stop a bomb Renard has planted in a pipeline inspection pig headed towards an oil terminal, and in order to get into the pipeline, he has to deactivate threat channels. The catch is that Renard's men are holding technicians hostage at each one. Make too much noise or move too slowly, they execute the hostages and you fail. This level managed to create genuine pressure in a way that most of the earlier levels didn't quite manage. Level 8 brings Bond to Zukovsky's caviar factory on the Caspian Sea, where the goal is to protect Zukovsky and Dr. Jones while destroying 3 attack helicopters, with saws attached to them, might I add. The video camera rocket launcher the game gives you for this task is, and I say this with some frustration, unreliable. It kept missing. Not because I was aiming badly, but because the lock-on was quite inconsistent. Anyway, 2 of the helicopters finally went down to rockets, and the 3rd was destroyed after we ignited and exposed pipeline to a flare gun. By this point, the story is moving towards its endgame. Zukovsky's gold-toothed bodyguard, Bullion, turns out to have been working for Elektra all along, and level 9, Turncoat, sends you through trains and the subway station chasing him down, shooting through Renard's men while protecting civilians, and there is a bomb planted in a ventilation shaft that you have to defuse later in the mission. You eventually catch up to Bullion, and the level dramatically ends with Bond and Jones being captured themselves. The full picture has been assembling throughout the game's back half. Elektra King was the villain the entire time. She killed her own father, is in a relationship with Renard, and has been engineering a plot to destroy Istanbul's competing oil infrastructure, so her own pipeline gains value. She abducts M and takes Bond to the Maiden's Tower, where she tortures him and also reveals that she cut off part of her own ear during her initial kidnapping to avoid suspicion about her relationship with Renard. Level 10 Fallen Angel is where the difficulty spikes without warning and does not apologize for it. Bond breaks free from captivity, but he needs to find and free M, defeats Gabor, Elektra's chief bodyguard, and then confronts Elektra herself. The whole level is a careful resource management exercise as you have to conserve health, armor, and grenades specifically for the Gabor fight at the end. And speaking of Gabor, he's really difficult. He shrugs off bullets like they're bad weather, hits hard, and has a steady supply of regular enemies feeding him behind him. The only reliable ways to bring him down are the grenades or catching and throwing back the pipe bombs he chucks at you. I spent more time on this fight than anything else in the game combined. And after all that pain, Elektra herself takes just one bullet. The contrast is almost funny. The game builds her up as the architect of the whole conspiracy, the person who has been manipulating everything since level 1, and she goes down like any ordinary enemy. Heck, regular enemies take more shots than she does before going down.
You see, James, you can't kill me. You'd miss me.
I never miss.
Anyways, level 11, Meltdown, is the finale. Bond dives after the submarine, frees Dr. Jones, and hunts down Renard before the reactor detonates. Renard's completed plan would have destroyed Istanbul and irradiated the Bosphorus, eliminating competing pipelines and making Elektra's route the only viable option. Bond impales him by firing the missing plutonium rod into his chest and then escapes the sinking submarine with Jones. The final level is also the one place where the game's lack of health pickups becomes truly punishing. The whole mission is a sustained firefight with armor pickups that absorb a couple of hits and nothing else. Get to Renard encounter with 2 little left in the tank and it becomes a slow war of attrition. It's not the worst final level I've ever played, it's just a grind in a way that feels like the game ran out of ideas for its last hour. I beat 007 The World Is Not Enough in about 6 hours. It's a functional, occasionally interesting mid-tier licensed game. The stealth levels, particularly Night's Watch and Masquerade, show genuine design ambition. The story, being lifted from a solid Bond film, gives it more narrative backbone than most tie-ins manage. The level variety is decent: a blackjack parlor, a ski slope, a nuclear facility, and the submarine interior, among others. The issues are real though. The audio quality is so bad that following the dialogue sometimes is a genuine challenge, which felt strange given that this is a game that clearly wants you to follow its story. The final level's difficulty is really punishing, especially given that the game has absolutely no health pickups. And as I've noted, anything aerial becomes a real test of patience thanks to the control scheme. But over the course of a 6-hour playthrough, it successfully held my attention, offering up hurdles that felt quite engaging rather than falling into the trap of being tedious. I'm giving this game a final score of 40. If you're a Bond fan with a nostalgia for the era and you're curious what the PS1 version of The World Is Not Enough looked like, it's worth an afternoon. If you want the better version of the game, the N64 release is available. But for this marathon, the PS1 version is the one that counts. That brings game number 1 to a close, which means the marathon is officially underway. If you made it this far, thank you so much. If you enjoyed this video, please drop a like and leave a comment down below. And if you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications while you're at it, because new episodes drop regularly and the algorithm isn't always going to tell you about them. Thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next episode.